Hello, everyone. Professor Wyatt here with the first of three 5-minute tutorials that will help walk us through the purpose of our next speech, which is called Stats, Sources, and Stories. And this is a speech where, if you read some of the information I've already provided, you can use the same topic that you used for your first informational speech. You don't have to, but you can. You have to make that decision whether your topic lends itself to statistical and outside expert opinions and studies, and whether that can really be folded into this next speech, because that's really what we're trying to accomplish here, is to make you realize that you don't have to be alone when you give a speech. I always say, bring your friends with you, stats, experts. Bring outside sources with you to help provide a platform for you to extend and add depth. And that's one of the main things that we're trying to do here, is to add quality depth, to speak deeper to something. And I think you'll see how we can accomplish that through solid research and using other people to help make your point. The one word that I want you to keep in your mind for this speech is this word: credibility. And I've already written to many of you, because this is kind of an instinctive thing, is that credibility is basically another word for believability. In other words, why should I believe you? And if we don't have that in a speech, if the audience is wondering, why should I believe this person? Well, you've kind of already sunk the ship. And so we want to establish this credibility type of a scenario where, even if you're talking about something like domestic violence or climate change, and you're not a scientist, or you're not in law enforcement or some other credentialed type of an area, it doesn't mean that you're disqualified from speaking to those things. But what it calls you to do is to go out and find evidence that come from credible sources. And so keep this in mind, this word credibility. Establishing your own credibility in your talk, regardless of what the topic is. Okay? So you need to make that decision now as to whether you want to extend that first talk, or if you want to throw that topic away and go into something that you believe lends itself to a more statistical and expert type of a topic. What we want to do here is to keep this in mind, that I always say that statistics are really good. Numbers help us give perspective to things. They help us wrap our minds around the frequency or the infrequency or the number or a percentage. Whatever it is, statistics are very helpful. But what a lot of speakers forget to do is to source their statistic. And the source is as important as the number itself. Again, credibility. The credibility comes from the source. In other words, why do I believe this number? And if you just say off the top of your head, 5,250 people will die today from diabetes, and you don't back that up with, according to the Center for Disease Control, I can begin to question that number, because you haven't really established that baseline credibility for the number. So I always say statistics are like little kids. They run around and they make a lot of noise, but the source is the parents. And anytime you give me a number, I want to meet the parents. I want to know where that number came from. Okay? So we always use this in combination, and this is where we say stats and source. And so this is an exercise in having you get into this mode where every time you give a number, you also supply me with the source of that number. And you can see how when the source is strong, the number becomes more believable. Okay? So we don't want any naked numbers. We don't want numbers that are just floating out there for me to question. I want to know where they came from. And it's a very good lesson for you when you get into business. You always want to have solid sourcing for any of your information that you're giving a coworker, a boss, a client, anything like that. You want to know where the number's coming from. That builds your credibility. So as you go through this exercise with me, keep in mind we want to establish credibility, believability, and begin to use numbers as a platform for deeper discussion. What I mean by this is a lot of people will go and do all the research, and then they'll give me the number and the source, and then they'll just let it sit there. And that amounts to maybe 6 seconds in a speech. So what I want you to do is to take those numbers and then ask the question, even out loud, what do these numbers mean? What do these numbers tell us? How are these numbers changed over time? What was this same number in 1950? What was this number in 1990? And what is it today in 2021? So you can give a historical thing. So don't get caught in this trap of going, well, he just wants a number and a source, because that doesn't add to the depth. So you've got to play this game where you go and you get your number and you source it out, and then you say, now, how do I explain this number? How do I make it even more credible and give it perspective that it deserves? And usually that leads to other numbers, okay? The requirement in this speech is to, in your body, have at least 2 instances where you give me the stat and the source. But many people discover that their speech becomes littered with statistics, because one number leads you to another number, and that number leads you to a study, and that study has other numbers. And this is how we get up into the 8, 10, 12-minute realm. Not by using the stat as a 6-second punch, but use it like a diving board, as a platform that you walk out. Okay? This is the challenge in this one.